Hi folks, Tacitus today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about patriotism, I guess, but how it's presented today is that anyone who shows any sort of patriotic, whether it be duty or fervour to their country, to their fellow citizens. There's a real attempt that's been going on for probably 20 years now to equate the two to fascism, Nazism. So if you're patriotic about your country and again your nation and your fellow citizens, then that is now equated to, well, you're a white supremacist Nazi. And it only really applies to white countries. So if Chinese people are patriotic about China, well, that's okay. So it's only something to apply to white people. So only white people can be fascist Nazis. Now, just so happens that the globalists want to shove a whole lot of black and brown peasants into the white West, and they want to break down the resistance that the white people have to having their nation and society taken away from them by a bunch of nearly all white, by the way, very rich elites. So let's just have a look at this. Again, it's been going on for 20 odd years, it's equating patriotism to Nazism. And it started in the school, so I would imagine that, the globalists sort of, and when they're having the boys downtown are having their meeting. Now we've got to make sure that we, if anyone has any patriotic fervour, seeing the flag or anything like that, that we equate it to fascism and that. So anyone who's patriotic about their country is Hitler. Okay, we've got to get that relationship. We've got to get that. We've spoken to the teachers' unions, and they're happy to do. They're going to do that for us. And we've got the colleges. We've got infiltrators in the public service now. We're changing minds in the body politic. We own the think tanks. So we're going to get this across. It just take a bit of time, but we'll get it across the line. It may take 10, 15, 20 years to get that. So as soon as someone says patriotic, instantly they'll get an image of Hitler in their mind. That's what we want. That's how we'll break down a part of the program, to break down any white Western resistance to being overrun with black and brown peasants that we're forcing in against the will of the people and without a referendum or a vote. So that's the thing. But let's sort of extend that out. I've noticed there's been quite a lot of talk recently of, well, you're patriotic. So what you're saying is white people are a master race. What you're saying is that you're Hitler and you're anti-Semitic and you want to kill the Jews. That's what you're saying. You damn fucking fascist Nazi. So that's that sort of talk's going on around. So let's have a look at the master race. I don't sort of particularly accept the master race thing anyway. But let's have a look at some examples of the master race type concept. Now, the Chinese fancied themselves, and still do, by the way, fancy themselves as the center of the universe. They see themselves as the Middle Kingdom surrounded by two-bit bum barbarians, and they're the sophisticated, cultured ones. Whether it's the Mongol hordes here or the folks around the rest of the Asia Pacific region. The Chinese fancied themselves as hot shit, so they saw themselves as the master race certainly in that region, and they looked at India and they looked at all the other areas around, what today would be Vietnam and Thailand, and also they looked offshore to places like Japan and the Philippines and elsewhere, and they thought, well, we're pretty cultured here. We've got pretty advanced writing, advanced alphabet. We've got this, we've got that. We've got a bureaucratic administration. We've got standing armies and navies. We're compared to all these people, we're way ahead technologically and organisationally. So when you look at that technological advancement and organisational advancement, you can very reasonably say that, well, we're the smartest people in the region. What is it about us that's special that gives us these technological and organisational advantages over the others? And I think it was around the 1200s that the Chinese sent a large fleet to invade Japan, for example. Part of the reason was that there was a lot of pirates in that area of the northern, around Korea and around the western side of Japan. A lot of pirates operating, and the Chinese were getting rather annoyed by that and thought, well, we'll go and teach those bums a lesson. So and their fleet got ruined or destroyed in a storm. And this is something that the Japanese came to believe was a kamikaze, a divine storm to kill off the Chinese invasion. Now this idea of being the supreme power in the region, and this was because of their innate superiority, was very much part of the Chinese thing. As I say, was even when the vastly technologically more advanced Europeans came along to China in the 1800s, the Chinese emperor and the senior bureaucrats still treated the barbarians, or the Europeans barbarians, as very inferior beings, and demanded they kowtow, meaning that they would get on their knees and bang their foreheads on the stone floor, and this was the ultimate sort of ritual of self-abasement come humiliation. That was a demonstration of the inferiority of that being, and by extension the superiority of the person they were bowing to. And this didn't go very well, and some of the people make a big thing of the Europeans put up signs across bridges saying no dogs or Chinese allowed across this bridge, and this is held up. See, damn fascist, Nazi, racist. But the Chinese did that first. No Europeans or barbarians or dogs allowed across this bridge. Bear in mind, at the time that dogs were used for eating and that sort of thing. They were which shocked the Europeans somewhat. But anyway, this is so the Chinese fancied themselves as superior and a superior race of people because of their technological and organizational sort of advantages. Now, if we look at say the Nubians in Central West Africa, or Central East Africa rather, they were a fairly sort of decent sized black kingdom amongst other blacks, and they fancied themselves as being superior in that region of Africa, and because they were militarily and organizationally and so on more advanced as they saw it than they were more advanced than the other blacks in the area. So they thought of themselves as an innately superior race, the Nubians. Now, if we sort of fast forward to say the 1700s and that sort of thing, and Shaka Zulu, the Zulu sort of kingdom didn't show any particular promise. It wasn't, you wouldn't obviously look at it back in the day and say, well, hey, these guys are going to really dominate this region. There was nothing special about them. And then this Shaka Zulu dude came along, and he developed a new military methods, which wasn't, you wouldn't call it revolutionary, of just surrounding the enemy and killing them. This was hardly a revolutionary concept. This has been used for thousands of years certainly in the West and in Europe as a way of doing warfare. But for some reason in that part of Africa, it was considered sort of quite revolutionary. He also developed a way of fighting in close. So developing a short stabbing spear and reorganizing the soldiers into a standing military with proper training and that sort of stuff, and rehearsing battles and the like. And you may say, well, hey, that's no big deal. And really it wasn't. But in terms of that area of Africa at the time, it was. And the Zulus, as a consequence, viewed themselves as being, which you still see today, by the way, in South Africa. The Zulus saw themselves as being a innately superior people to the other blacks, the Bantus and the other blacks in the region. Part of that was because the Zulus had militarily overcome really all the other tribes in that part of Africa. So, and if we look at the various in various parts of Islam, you have these ideas of various tribes and areas and territories in Islam, one thinking they're superior to the other, and so on. Now, if we look at, say, ancient Persia, this is pre the Islamic time, ancient Persia, and you look at the size of the Persian Empire, it was huge, going from, well, if you think of Alexander the Great's conquest, but it was going from really what today is northern India, all the way through to northern Greece, through Turkey and northern Greece. For its day, it was a massive empire. A lot of that was desert, by the way. It wasn't all sort of populated areas, but nonetheless, regardless, it was a huge achievement. And the Persians today, mostly modern day Iran, but the Persians, again, because of their technological and organizational advantages, organizational, not only just in terms of the bureaucratic administration, but in other things like tax collection and that sort of stuff. And they were able to dominate that whole area, and they perceived themselves, the Persians, as a naturally superior people. So this master race thing's been going on for a long time. There's the propaganda machine of today, like, where's the Nazis? No, it wasn't. It was going on for a long, long time. Now, the same could be said for, say, the French during the time of, say, Louis XIV, and even up to the time of Napoleon Bonaparte, where the French believed themselves to be, superior in martial spirit, militarily, and also in organisationally, particularly in terms of military logistics and things like that. So they perceived themselves to be a naturally superior race of people in Western and even Central Europe at the time. Now the English similarly, because of their, again, technological and organisational and trading and their vast trading network, their vast navy, they perceive themselves to be, I wouldn't use the term master race. I don't think it was ever really used, but they perceive themselves to be again, technologically and organisationally more advanced than the folks around them. And certainly, in economic management, the English were actually quite advanced during the day, and were able to, for a nation of less than 10 million people, they were able to finance virtually global wars against populations that were close on 10 times their number, and yet they were able to prosecute these wars and win and prevail, or if not prevail, certainly financially exhaust the other side, so that they were the English were kind of the last man standing, and so they were able to reap the benefits. But they fancied themselves, through until the early 1900s at least, as being a particularly unique and gifted race. And why not? If you look at their achievements, then they certainly had the credentials to make those sort of claims. Now, the Japanese in the late 1800s and right through from then also believed themselves to be a specially chosen race, and they had an incredible ability and discipline and focus and organisational structure, where they converted themselves from being really a third world medieval feudal state in the late 1860s, and by the 1890s, they were considered a significant regional power, and by the 1930s, they were considered to be a power of global capacity, and by the 1980s, they were, in economic terms, they were rivaling the United States. So the Japanese, with good reason, believe themselves to be, again, a special people capable of achieving outstanding feats of not only technology but organisation and finance. And this usually has to be it, whether it be regional or extra regional or global. There has to be those achievements. Like, there has to be something they can point to say, well, we're a special people because we've achieved these things, and we're able to invent this and create that and produce such and such. And so the master race thing, or we're a special people, is grounded in something real and material. It's not fanciful stuff like the fucking Brahmins in India, where hey, we're just custodians of the knowledge. So we're just naturally superior. We don't have to do anything or achieve anything or produce anything or create anything. We just parasite off the masses in the peasants toiling in the fields. Now, coming to the German thing, this idea that it was uniquely German, this master race stuff, that's crap and can be rejected out of hand. What the Nazi propagandists did, well, there were two things they wanted to do. They perceived that Germany had been unreasonably humiliated at the end of the First World War. And when you consider how close the Germans came to winning in the First World War, you realise, they were within a whisker of success on two occasions, and again, they defeated the Russians, and if the Americans had even delayed entering the war by another 6 months, the Germans would have won. It was that much of a close run thing. So they weren't happy with being treated like shit after the war, and the Versailles Treaty, and the British and the French were terrified of and realised how close. But if you look at the mass mobilisation of all resources and people during World War I, the French and the British had a very decisive advantage in many ways, in population, particularly given the British Empire. Over 300,000 Australian soldiers served in the British Army, or in the wider Allied army during the First World War, just from Australia, for goodness sakes. If you take the mobilisation from Britain and Canada and elsewhere, and they were able to field a vast army, there was the French mobilisation and so on. So the British and the French had a big advantage, but the Germans were far more efficient in the use of their resources. Better equipment, long-range cannons that didn't keep on breaking down, interchangeable parts. Better training for the troops, better quality officers. They just were far more efficient. And for every 2 casualties the Germans took, they were inflicting 3.3 casualties on the other guys. So that they were just better. So they made their resources last longer. And the British were terrified and the French were terrified of this and wanted to hobble Germany forever with this Versailles Treaty thing. Hitler comes along and particularly when the Great Depression hits and says, hey, we've been unreasonably humiliated. We're a proud people with many achievements, which they did. It's true. So we're going to, we're not going to put up with this shit. And let's look at the achievements, the German achievements throughout history. There's technological, there's philosophical, there's music, there's achievements in every category, in every field of endeavour. The Germans could point to, and they had every reason. They were high achieving people and had every reason to be proud of those achievements and to point to them and say, well, we are a special people because, and this is, it's founded in fact and reality. The Germans did achieve those things, but the Nazis waved it around and said, well, look, we must be a special people because of these achievements. That's not new in history. The British did it, the Zulus did it, the Japanese did it, the Chinese did it. They all did it. So the fact that the Germans did it is no big deal. Again, that was a widespread way of going. But the thing about these, it was based in fact. The Germans did do those things. They were leading engineers in the areas of metallurgy, chemical engineering, and electrical engineering, and mechanical engineering, and so on. The Germans were certainly at the forefront of this and had many achievements to point to throughout history, back in the Holy Roman German Empire and so on. So let's have a look at now ideology is separate from this master race business. that instead of being a master race of people or high achieving people or a nation state of high achievers, again, based on facts, something that can be pointed to. Why are we rich and the other guys are poor? That type of thing. The richer nations are higher achieving nations. Whether it's, for whatever the reason, whether it's technical or it's usually both technical and organisational, financial. So there's usually the three working in concert there, and it has to be a hard-working, industrious people. It needs to be people prepared to risk and innovate. I mean, there are other factors there in the wider scheme of things. But having a look now at ideology. Now, ideology, a master ideology, let's say communism, and how the Soviets applied it in the Soviet Union, Russia and the Soviet Union after 1917. The ideology was supreme. And that created a very different. Once an ideology is supreme, then you have no merit. There can't be a right way of doing things because, as in a practical sense, it's everything is now ideological, and the view that you can restructure and recreate and rewrite society, if not history, by applying this ideology with rigor. Now, but it also means that if you don't believe in the ideology, or they think you don't believe, or you have the wrong thoughts, or they don't think you're fervent enough in your observance of the ideology, with every ideology, they will kill you if you don't go along with it. Whether it's Pol Pot, whether it's Stalin, whether it's Mao, you have the wrong thoughts, they will kill you, and that's something that in the master race thing isn't the case. Now, the Germans the Nazis wanted to evict the Jews, not to kill them, but to evict the Jews, the gypsies, and the homosexuals. Now, the percentage of the population that were made of Jews, gypsies, and homosexuals was less than 1%. So that was hardly an Armageddon thing. If the Nazis hadn't invaded Poland, where there were allegedly 3 million Jews living, that had come from various areas, by the way, they weren't all Polish. Some had come from Belarus and Ukraine and evicted by the communists. So some were from Hungary and Romania and all sorts of other places around Europe. But if Nazis hadn't invaded Poland, then one wonders would the mass murder of Jews even occur during that time. But there wasn't the intention to kill off the people there. It was the intention was to evict them initially, and the Nazis went to considerable time and trouble and expense to help the Jews leave Germany and emigrate to other countries such as the United States and so on. So when we compare the master race, I'm using master race as a generic term here, but when we can compare the master race, where you've got the option of leaving, or the ideology where the master idea, so there's either your nation state, your citizenry, you're the master, high achieving master race, or you have a master ideology where if you don't have the right thoughts, they will kill you, and it is arbitrary law. And then we go to a sort of a third situation which is really the Western liberal democracies, where we're all equal under the law, and we're all equal before a law that is put in, a law that is crafted by our elected representatives. Our elected representative law is crafted and then impartially applied to the entire population. We are all subject to the law. And should there be a dispute over someone transgressing on these laws, then there is an completely independent of the body politic, an independent judiciary that will hear the matter based on fact and evidence tested in a court of law. Now, those are the three options you've got, because today we're seeing a situation that's going along the same lines as really the Soviet or any communist ideological system, where crimes against the ideology are punishable, severely punishable, January 6th, whatever. but the crimes against the ideology are punishable. You disagree with mass migration, you're a fucking fascist, racist, Nazi, Hitler. Prison for you, motherfucker. So we're looking at crimes against ideology, and now the only crimes being prosecuted. Donald Trump, he's opposing the globalist ideology. Let's get him. It doesn't matter whether he's guilty of doing something. It doesn't matter whether there are any facts. It doesn't matter whether there's any evidence against him. His crimes are against the ideology. That's all that fucking matters now. And this is increasing what we're seeing, which is how it was in the Soviet Union. You could pretty much kill people and no one cared. But crimes against the ideology, that won't be tolerated. And even in the case of, say, Cambodia, where people who were believed to be above average IQs could be killed off for fear of that they may be able to see the flaws in the ideology, and we can't have that. So, and I see that in businesses today, where these ideological, fanatical businesses, they seem hell bent on hiring low IQ morons because they're the ones that are most likely to go along with the ideology. Look at the placard wavers with on the street, the Black Lives Matter. These are people that are only concerned with the ideology. The facts, who gives a fuck? So just consider that the three things. As far as the master race thing, and again I use that term generically. It sounds bad, but it's only used by high achieving societies who clearly have achieved above and beyond all the other societies around them. So it's grounded in reality, as much as it may sort of sound, it's grounded in reality. But whereas ideology is not grounded in any reality. And then the liberal democracy is where everyone is subject to the law and is then free to go about their own business and to open businesses and invent the cure for cancer or whatever else, subject to the law, an independent, impartial law. You take your pick. Which one do you want to live in? You've been with Tacitus today, your Pushback channel, and thank you for listening.